lyrics for the occasion. So, little Don Williams here.
Lord, I hope this day is good. I'm feeling empty and misunderstood. I should be thankful, Lord, I know I should. But Lord, I hope this day is good. Lord, have you forgotten me? I've been praying to you faithfully. I'm not saying I'm a righteous man, but Lord, I hope you understand. I don't need fortune and I don't need fame. Send down the thunder, Lord, send down the rain. But when you're planning just how it will be, plan a good day for me. Lord, I hope this day is good. I'm feeling empty and misunderstood. I should be thankful, Lord, I know I should. But Lord, I hope this day is good. You've been the king since the dawn of time. All that I'm asking is a little less crime. It might be hard for the devil to do, but it would be easy for you. Lord, I hope this day is good. I'm feeling empty and misunderstood. I should be thankful, Lord, I know I should. But Lord, I hope this day is good.
Thank you very much. Jenny, you got such a nice, sweet, soft voice. And Jamie, we thank you for being here with us. No, y'all, you guys compliment each other well. I greatly appreciate both of you so much. We'll continue our lesson in Genesis. So if you want to go ahead and be turning to Genesis chapter 1, and I'll catch up with you in just a moment. But a Jewish scholar wrote about Genesis, the work of the Creator, in which is marked by absolute perfection and flawless, systematic orderliness, is distributed over 7 days. 6 for labor, and the 7th set aside for the enjoyment of the completed task. There are 3 words in the opening verse of Genesis, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. It's God, heaven, and earth. They are repeated multiple times throughout the first chapter. They are in multiples of 7, actually. God is mentioned 35 times in Genesis chapter 1, 5 times 7. Heaven is mentioned 21 times, 3 times 7. Earth is also mentioned 21 times. Again, 3 times 7. In addition to this, in the original language of Hebrew, it has 7 words in the first verse. In the second verse, it has 14 words. The 7th paragraph talks of the 7th day, and it has 3 sentences with 7 words each. Genesis is a display of majestic grammar inspired by the Holy Spirit given to man to write. That's amazing. I can see you're flabbergasted yourself. But in verse 6, we're going to move and talk about a separation. We're going to talk about a separation, and most scholars believe this really points to salvation. Look at verse 6. Then God said, "Let there be an expanse. Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. Now, what does that mean? What does all that mean there? Let there be an expanse, let it separate the waters from the waters. A lot of waters words in there. What does that mean? It's not talking about a horizontal separation and land coming up from that. It's talking about a vertical separation here, lifting up the waters, separating the waters vertically. And then verse 7 here it says, God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse, and it was so. Now waters, it talks about a below, and then it talks about above. What does it mean? We're going to focus on what it means in the above waters this morning. What does that word mean, above? It means skies, it means heaven, it means up, it means atmosphere. Why did God make an atmosphere? Because God had designed this place to be inhabited by humans. You need an atmosphere, so God created an atmosphere. He created the earth with the idea, the formation of an atmosphere, because He had you in mind from the very beginning. You say, well, I don't know. Is that true? Well, look at Psalm. Psalm chapter 115, verse 16, and it tells you exactly that. The heavens are the heavens of the Lord, but the earth He has given to the sons of men. That's you. So He had an atmosphere. He had the earth. He had you in mind even before you were born. He had already seen you. He already knew what you needed. He knew that you needed a sky above. He knew what you needed. He knew that you needed this atmosphere to live in. So He created it. Now we're going to look at 5 things that go back to this water above. Significant things for creation. Significant things for your life. Significant things for animal life. We're going to, most scholars, all scholars, all creation scientists and Old Testament theologians, they all agree with these. And this is 5 things that they say about this water above, the importance of it. They say what God did was He formed a water vapor around the earth, around the globe, around the earth. God made a perfect environment. When God made the earth, there was this water vapor that encompassed the world. We don't have that today, and I'm going to show you to. Stick with me, pay attention, listen to what I'm saying, and when we get to the end of this, you will have connected some major dots on the significance of this. But what God did, He made a perfect environment for the earth, for humans, and its inhabitants. Peter talks about the perfect environment as well. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 3 through 7. Chad will have these on the screen. Here's what Peter writes. Know this first of all, that in the last days mockers will come with their mocking, following after their own lust and saying, where is the promise of His coming? For ever since the fathers fell asleep, all continues just as it has from the beginning of creation. Now let me ask you, Peter wrote that in his day, but does that sound like today's day as well? Is there not mocking going on about God, about the Creator, about creation, about life as we Christians live? Is there not mocking toward Christians today? You can attack, you can say, you can't say anything you want about another religion, but if you want to attack somebody, you just find a Christian and you attack them. That's perfectly okay. Peter says that was in his day as well. Verse 5, For when they maintain this, it escapes their notice that by the word of God the heavens existed long ago, when the earth was formed out of the water and by water, through which the world at that time was destroyed by what? By flooding water. But by His word the present heavens and earth are being reserved for fire, kept for the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men. Now I think Peter, he remembers what Genesis 1 says. He's going back as he's talking, as as he's penning this, as he's writing this, he's going back, he's talking about God creating, God separating the water. He talks about the destruction of the flood, and then he's going to come in verse 10, and he's going to talk about a final destruction. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up. So Peter is drawing them back. He's showing God created. The world was destroyed once by a flood, and then it will be destroyed again by fire. So he's showing, yes, out of water, God created. He separated. Now, do you remember last week we talked about the creation account in many different civilizations? And I listed off 5 or 6 of those that we talked about. Well, most civilizations, Peter's talking about a flood here, most, if not all, civilizations, they have a historical account of a flood as well. And I'm going to show you. You would wonder, well, where did they get this? Where did they get this information? Do you remember what happened after the flood? Where did the civilization, after the flood, God told Noah and his sons, you need to spread out, you need to go out, you need to populate the earth again, you need to redo all of that. And what did they do? They kind of stayed together, didn't they? They stayed together in a place called Babel until God made them separated by confusing their language. So it would make sense that all civilizations of the world would have had a flood story to go back to, because at one time they were all together at a place called Babel. Now let me tell you about a few of these civilizations. The Burmese people say the vaults, at one time the vaults of heaven opened up and it poured out rain. The Babylonians believed there was a goddess who was cut in half by a god, Marduk. She was cut in half. One part of her was thrown to the earth, and it formed the waters there. The other part of her was thrown into the sky, and that was the waters from the sky. The Egyptians believe that in the cosmic waters in space, that the sun rides on a barge and it floats along on this barge in this cosmic sea, and that's how it moves across the sky every day. The Indians, they believe the goddess of the ocean is the same goddess of the sea, so they believe they're one. The Greeks believe this also. They believe that the ocean, there was an ocean around them on the earth, and they believe that there was an ocean above them as well. So see, ancient civilization talks about a flood, a historic flood event. Now here's the second thing about these separated waters. We're talking about this water canopy surrounding the earth, bringing forth a perfect environment. If there was a water canopy around the earth, it would answer some questions. It would answer and confirm what scientists say. They say, scientists say, creation scientists especially say, and it's proven through fossils, you're going to want to be here tonight to get this proof. I'm just telling you, scientists say that at one point the earth was all pretty much one temperature. It was a tropical climate. We would like that today. I would like that tropical climate here in western Kentucky. There would be this lush green vegetation. It would be like a tropical jungle. And with this lush green vegetation and this tropical climate, do you know what it would be prime for? Ginormous animals. Maybe you believe in dinosaurs, maybe you don't. I do. I'm going to show you. I'm going to prove to you. Dinosaurs. Do you know that in Alaska and Antarctica, they routinely find fossils of palm trees? They find large leafy plants in Alaska, in the polar caps, in Antarctica. It is not uncommon at all. How did they get there? How did they get there? I'm going to tell you how they got there. Here's the third thing, though. The third thing about these waters with this canopy. Now, the closer you get to the equator, what happens? The closer you get to the sun. And it's significantly different. You can go, if you go to the equator this time of year, you better take some sunscreen with you. You don't necessarily need sunscreen in our area this time of the year. But with this water canopy surrounding the earth, there was no harmful UV rays. They didn't know what that was like. Stay with me, okay? We've got UV rays non-existent with the water vapor canopy. We have tropical climate. We have lush green vegetation. We have large animals moving around. A perfect environment to sustain these type of animals. Now, you know, if you live in Florida or someplace south of here, or maybe even here, what do you need to do? You need to go to the dermatologist every year. You need to be checked out to see if you have maybe a skin cancer or something that needs to be removed. They didn't have that then. They didn't need that because there was this water canopy around that filtered out these rays. This is significant. Remember these things. Because of this perfect environment, people lived longer as well, pre-flood. After the flood, people died off at a much quicker rate. Listen to this. Noah was 950 years old when he died. His son Shem was 600. Shem's son was 433 years old when he died. Terah, Abraham's father, was 205 years old when he died. Abraham was 175. Isaac died at 180 years. Jacob lived for 147. Moses lived 120 years. So you see, after the flood, post-flood, mankind begins to die off at a faster rate. What happened at the time of the flood to shorten their lives? It had to be this water canopy that collapsed and changed the environment of the world. Okay? So pre-flood, God had created a perfect environment. He created this water canopy. It protects people from the UV rays. They live longer because they're in this perfect environment. It produces vegetation all over the world to sustain all forms of life. But after this water canopy is gone, the environment takes a drastic change. Now here's the fourth thing. Prior to the flood, there was no rain. Genesis chapter 2, verse 6 shows us this. But a mist used to rise from the earth and water the whole surface of the ground. So what happened? God designed a sprinkler system for the globe. Yeah. See, I like mowing my grass in the summer. I like to see green grass. I like that. I like it lush. I like it thick. I like it when it rains an inch or so a week and it keeps that stuff growing. You may be one of those people that just sprays Roundup on your whole yard and you just assume it turned to dust. But God in His, Jamie says that's Him right there. He doesn't want to have anything to do with mowing. But I do. So I like this idea of this rainbird sprinkler system that God had designed. So pre-flood, God has a sprinkler system that comes up, this mist that comes up. How often does it come up? It comes up as often as God told it to come up, whether it's daily, multiple times during the evening, or whatever He set the program for. That's how it comes up. And do you know how many brown spots there were in the world? I suspect there were none. I suspect this world looked like a golf course. He had the sprinkler system turned on at the right time. There was no lack or need. There was no absence of growth, of vegetation growing. There was no dead grass anywhere. The environment was consistent. Now get this. I just told you there was no rain before the flood. The environment was consistent. If it's a consistent environment, it's stable, right? It's stable. It's routine. It's regular. They can set their clock by it probably. They can set their, well, it must be 6 a.m. God just got done watering the grass for the day. You know? But if there is a consistent, a stable environment, what is absent? Turbulence, fronts, storms are absent, rain is absent, thunder is absent, lightning is absent. There is no snowstorm, there is no tornadoes, there are no hurricanes before the flood. Can you imagine? Have you ever thought about this? Can you imagine? Noah's been building that ark for what, 100 plus years? He builds that thing and people are laughing at him. It's never rained a drop. We don't even have rain in our vocabulary. Noah's going to go out. He's going to build an ark. He's going to talk about this great flood coming. They need to repent. They need to turn to God. People are laughing him out of the community. Can you imagine that first clap of thunder or that first bolt of lightning that mankind ever saw? Think about that. Can you imagine the fear that they were in awe of, that they were shaking of? It is no wonder that they were beating for their life to get in that ark after God had sealed Noah and his family up in it when they saw and heard that first thunder and saw that first bolt of lightning. They were scared to death. Here's a fifth thing. With this canopy, there would have been a great air pressure. Now, scientists have been able to they can tell you the air pressure and things like that. I don't know how they do that, but this is just what I read, okay? I'm not a scientist. I told you that. I'm not a scientist. I'm just reading and sharing with you what I read. But there would have been a greater air pressure. Have you ever heard of an isobaric chamber? Isobaric? I think it's isobaric. But what does that do? That helps athletes use it. You see them. ESPN does a special on an athlete or something like that. Almost in every athlete, if they got any money at all, they have this isobaric chamber that they sleep in, that they recoup in. They go in, they have a game day. A boxer probably has it. Floyd Mayweather, he probably has it. They'll have one of these after their event. They will take a few hours in this chamber, and it infuses their body with this rich oxygen, and it speeds up their tissue healing process. The earth would have been created that way. The earth would have had a heavier air pressure. It would have been like one of these isobaric chambers. It oxygenates your blood at a much faster rate. Therefore, it promotes healing. It speeds up the healing process. So do you see with this water canopy in place, do you see now how men lived longer in that day? Absolutely. God designed the atmosphere that way. Now, we're still talking about this separation of water and what God did here. Now, did you know that the clouds, now we're blessed today. We're going to have a cloudless sky day. The sun's going to come out. It's going to be primed to get rid of some of this snow on the roads. But when a storm comes by, here it is. If you take all of the clouds around the globe today, and if you could squeeze all of the moisture out of them, do you know how much water you would get? You would get 1 to 2 inches of water. A 1 to 2 inch rise globally if you squeezed all of the water out of the clouds today. Now we have downpours. We have localized
flooding at some times, but if you squeeze it on, you spread it all throughout the globe, you'd have 1 to 2 inch rise worth of water around the planet. So this source of water had to come from somewhere besides just clouds. This flood that is going to be talked about, had to come from somewhere else. It had to come from heaven. It had to come from this water vapor canopy. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So this water vapor canopy is holding back all of this moisture. It promotes tropical environment. It promotes longevity of life. Everything is growing. Everything is just perfect. Life is long. But to flood the planet, God had to do more than just squeeze the water out of the clouds like a sponge. Something had to collapse. Something had to erupt, and it was that water vapor canopy. Now, do you understand that you do not have to take a back seat to evolution? You have written proof in your hand that tells exactly what God did. God caused a flood. Every civilization, historical civilization, has an account of it, has it written, maybe has it drawn upon some wall somewhere. Christianity and the belief in a divine creator does not have to take a back seat to Darwin or anybody else in the world. We have the truth. And I am showing you step by step how this could possibly happen. And if you want to know more, I'm telling you, come back tonight. We're in the world. Could you have gotten tropical plants in Alaska and the polar caps? Because the earth at one time was one fairly regulated climate. So, you have these giant animals. You have men living hundreds of years, centuries. What do you think about dinosaurs? Did Noah take dinosaurs with him? Absolutely he did. It says he took 2 of every kind. He didn't say he took 2 of everything. It's a difference in a kind of thing. We'll get to that later. Noah didn't have to take a full-grown dinosaur on the ark. But what happened? What happened after the flood? When they came off that ark, everything was different. Remember the water vapor canopy? It's collapsed. It's gone. It no longer exists. Do you know what happened when Noah stepped off of that ark? He walked out that day. When God lowered that door, he walked out that day and he felt the sun like he had never felt before. Skin burned. It got leathery. He felt heat. He saw the sun as he had never seen it before, brighter, the rays, the view. When they stepped out of that ark, that perfect environment that they once lived in was gone. Tropical climate, gone. Lush vegetation, gone. When they stepped out of that ark, do you know what happened to the poles on this earth? Ice. They were ice capped. When they stepped out of that ark, do you know what happened in the Middle East? Desert area. Deserts were formed. Deserts were created. It was no longer the same. There was something different. And it was this water vapor canopy. The earth, the air was no longer this oxygen-rich air that promoted healing, that gave the long life. With this oxygenated air, do you know what that caused with the animals? It caused them to grow bigger. With this oxygenated air, do you know that they had They had giants in the Old Testament. It would have promoted the growth of bigger creatures, bigger men probably. We do know that there were giants. It would have sustained them. They would have had the oxygen they needed. Well, you see these big NFL players, and they've been running all afternoon. And what do? They go over the sideline, and what do? They get a mask for some oxygen. They're big guys. They wouldn't have needed that back then. God had already planned for that. But now that this canopy is gone, the growth is gone, the vegetation is gone, the protection from the UV rays is gone. They felt the sun. They saw different things. It was a completely different environment. There was no more of this good growth for these dinosaurs and other animals to eat. Now I say all of that I've told you to bring you back to Genesis chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. Then God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the water, and let it separate the waters from the waters. God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. And here's really all you need to know. And it was so. You don't understand verse 6 or 7, and I don't either, because I had to read other intelligent people to tell me everything I just told you. I'm not a scientist. But the last three words of verse 7 is all you need to know. It was so. Not enough for you? Verse 9. Then God said, let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. Verse 11. Then God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit after their kind, and seed in them. And it was so. Verse 15. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens, to give light on the earth. And it was so. Verse 24. Then God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth after their kind. And it was so. Do you know what "and it was so" means? It means it's firm. God spoke, and it's done. That's all you need to know. That's it. It was so. God said it. God did not have difficulty in doing these things. Do you know what? Some of you might like to move furniture around your house. We have this large entertainment center that Amy wants to get rid of. I'm really fine with her getting rid of it as well, because I really can't move it. I can't move it. I have to get along the wall. I have to use the wall for leverage. I have to get back there. I have to push. I have to try to pick up. I have to shove. I have to budge. We're looking for some kind of pry bar to move that thing. The thing's got casters on it as well, but when we had carpet, casters and carpet don't work good together. It just sits there. When I have to move furniture, if I have to do anything at all, it makes me break out in a sweat, and I don't want to do it. But do you know what? God did not break out in a sweat. God's hands didn't get dirty. God didn't have to grunt. He didn't have to take some ibuprofen after he had been moving all day and creating things all day because he was going to have a backache when he woke up the next morning. God spoke, and it was so. So let me ask you, what are you carrying around today? What burden are you carrying today? What is it that weights you down this morning? Do you know that you have a God who can lift that burden off of you? There is something you have to do, though. You have to be humble enough to give it to him. You like moving furniture? You like moving? Boy, I hate moving. We've moved just, 2-3 times or something like that. I despise moving. I do not want to load up a truck, a trailer, rent a U-Haul, or do it. It makes me sick to think of moving. Lord, please don't make me move. Be careful. If I have to move, by George, somebody's paying for it. I better just shut up. I better shut up quickly. Yes, we just need to go home. We need to go home right now. Forget everything you just heard. But no. You are familiar with weight. You're familiar. You know what it is to pick up something heavy, to labor, to get frustrated, to sweat, to get your hands calloused, to get your hands dirty, to struggle with something. So what have you been struggling today with? Is it something physical? Is it something spiritual? And we're not talking about packing up your house and moving. We're talking about something much bigger than that. What are you struggling with today? Do you not know that God, and it was so, that He can remove that from you if you will just turn it over to Him, if you will just accept the fact, and probably everybody here this morning has, accepted the fact that Jesus Christ is His Son, that He came and He did the work for you. You no longer have any work that you have to do. I don't work for God out of obligation. I work for God. I serve God because I love Him. That compels me to want to be His hands and His feet. This verse, 6 and 7, it talks about the separation of things. What it's saying is God can separate you from what weighs your life down. Do you want that this morning? Do you want to be separated from guilt? Do you want to be separated from the sin in your life? Oh yeah, brother, but I accepted Jesus Christ when I was 5 years old at Bible school. That's great, but I'm pretty sure you have sinned since then. Have you turned back? Have you confessed that sin to God? Because when you don't confess that sin to God, you are not separated from your salvation. You are separated from fellowship. Do you not want to have your fellowship restored with the Heavenly Father? I'm going to ask you to bow your head. As Jamie